The Unfiltered by Jade.
Jade. Welcome to the Unfiltered by Jade, where we get out of the box and dive into topics that are sidelined. I look forward to entertain, educate, and inspire. Feel free to like, share, subscribe, donate, and make everybody know about this.
Beats by RB Records.
Shopping assistance, your style, your budget. Our services include online and local shopping for individuals and businesses, personal shopping, purchasing of company and office supplies, importing and exporting small packages across Jamaica and worldwide, and helping you find unique gifts and items for all events and occasions. Contact us at 876-919-5195 or shoppingassistance2015@gmail.com. Shopping Assistance, your style, your budget. Welcome back to the Unfiltered by Jade. Today we have with us here Melanie James, and she is here to have a discussion with us, and it is a very interesting conversation that we're about to have. But before we even go into it, I'm going to ask her to introduce herself. So hi, Melanie.
Hello, Jade. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Melanie James, and I am from Cincinnati, Ohio, and I am a disabilities advocate, a caregiver, small business owner, and at most, I am a melanated medical mom.
That's
so thank you so much for having me.
So I want you to just tell us your story.
Okay, so for me, I started essentially in my degree with journalism from Central State University, so represent HBCUs. And essentially my degree in journalism has definitely prepared me from a standpoint of understanding and really grasping what's happening in situations. And so after I earned my degree in 2012, I did get married and have children shortly after, fulfilling my career. And the problem that I ran into was healthcare. And so essentially, growing up, I did have parents who were blessed enough to have benefits. And so I experienced the good side of healthcare in terms of having, regular dentist appointments and having, regular healthcare checkups and whatnot, and essentially having, a healthy life and whatnot. But when it came to me as a mother, as a wife, the experiences that I had in healthcare didn't necessarily correlate to the ones that I had as a child, but it became more apparent that it started to become a matter of equity in it. And for me, as a mom, especially as a minority mom, knowing the statistics about our mortality rate for our children, being, having high rates and having it get to the point where, we're leading maternal morbidity in Ohio, and that's at 112%. And that's from, the Health Policy Institute of Ohio. And so in the disparities of maternal mortality, we're leading by 29%. And so in understanding that, I then had to experience the pediatric adversities in terms of as it pertains to the children who experience, have disabilities or have different abilities, if you will. And in experiencing the lack of accountability is partially the reason why there are health disparities now. And so for me, I wanted to make it my mission because with the mindset of a journalist, I have to be the voice for the people who, don't have the ability to get on a platform or, build a platform from scratch and have the conversations that a lot of people are having, because for the most part, They put out reports that make allegations about the Black community, but what they don't take into consideration and into accountability is the fact that there's nobody being held accountable for the lack of adequate health care that the Black community isn't receiving, or is receiving for that matter. And so for me, it's imperative for me that we make sure that we circulate that conversation, because for caregivers like myself, nobody's considering them when it comes to, the healthcare disparities, because they're still stuck on, the hospitals. They're not thinking about healthcare outside of, the health institutes and the hospitals and whatnot. And so to me, it's my mission to make sure that we don't just make it this a awareness statement, but that we actually drive it past just awareness and a conversation, and we actually make this to a point where people with disabilities, minorities with disabilities, can feel not just included, but they can also have a life as well without experiencing so many barriers just to live. So that's just, that's the place where I come from for my platform.
Okay. All right. So we had spoken earlier this year about even a situation that happened with you that you experienced. I want you to talk a little bit about that. And from that, I want you to tell us how it affected you emotionally, the support you had, and how family is important.
Okay. So earlier this year, about 20 days exactly before I was due to graduate from my master's program for going to school to be healthcare administration, my son had passed away.
Hmm.
And this wasn't something that was anticipated. It really happened out of the blue. He did have healthcare complications, but when it happened, it literally it was like a ton of bricks hit us. And in the days of that happening, I just remember just talking to my husband and saying, I don't know how we got here. It felt like torture, because in a background sense, in 2019, our son had a cardiac arrest as well. Now, today we haven't found the complete determination of what caused his passing, but in the medical notes that was written, they are labeling it as a cardiac arrest. And so from 2019, we have been working to try and um, rehabilitate him health wise. And, we had just recently did E EEG for his brain activity, or EKG, I believe, for his brain activity. And we were waiting for those results to come back to see if there was any brain activity. And then on April 30th, everything blew up. And it felt like a nuclear bomb hit us emotionally, because we lost our child, we lost a member of our family, and the amount of family that supported us is just astronomical. Family and friends, associates, and, people who were close to the situation, who knew about the situation. And I don't think that we would have been able to get through everything if we didn't have our family helping us and, checking on us. And it didn't always have to be a conversation. It didn't
Mm-hmm.
have to be, I'm coming to bring you flowers, or what do you need? Sometimes it's just being in our presence. And I think one of the best things is that we were able to do things in a healthy communication, in terms of, I recall having a conversation with my husband, and I said, I feel like I got hit by a bus. And then we're getting phone calls about arrangements, about his body, things like, when you're hearing these things, it feels weird, because I had literally had a conversation with, some people were calling me and praying with me every morning. And my anxiety has actually probably worsened since then.
Mm.
And I communicate that with people so that people, I'm I'm not going to hide it. And I'm unfiltered, right? So I'm unfiltered, and so I'm having these conversations with people and letting them know, like, I'm up at. I told my sisters that I have my sisterhood conversation and talking. I've even said I sometimes am up at 3, 4 a.m. in the morning because how he passed away, it was similar to how it happened in 2019. And as a caregiver, you understand that everything is like you have to remember certain things to prepare you for future situations in case something happens again. And
Mhm.
so, in these instances of waking up and then getting to a point where somebody has been deemed to not be in a breathing fashion, that gets to a point where you're waking up and you're checking checking pulses. And,
Mhm.
you're running around the house like, okay, did I do everything? Because that's the impact it has. And so I tell them this to let them know, like, if you are up, give me a phone call, or, let me know something, or, just sit on the phone with me, or, you can Google chat or whatever. Or, sometimes my husband, he finds that when some of my anxiety symptoms are, I get the cold shiver. And so him having heat, like he has to like warm my body up, like just kind of rub my arms and put
Mhm.
blankets on me just to help accommodate me, and then vice versa too. I think
Yeah.
the best thing is experiencing that. The first time my son had a cardiac arrest, um, the way that I viewed the black male response is it could have used or benefited from some resources and tools and safe spaces. And so that was in 2019. And so today in the year 2022, I'm finding that the response is a lot better in terms of not just, listening and receiving what, a female may say or a black woman will say, but actually engaging and saying, oh my goodness, like this hurts. Like you can cry, like you can shed these tears. And it's not about masculinity. It's not about, are you strong enough? It's not about, you are strong in your tears too, you know?
Mhm.
And seeing them have those emotions and also seeing them support each other, and then seeing us as a community. I view my family as a community too, but the people who are friends to the family, that's the community part as well. And the people who worked with us here, coming to the funeral, or asking, stopping by, having people who work with my other son, having their staff write cards and stuff, send their condolences. A lot of people don't have to do the things that they do to say my condolences, but those sending those things to me, that is what helps get people like me out of bed.
Yeah.
It sounds so cliche, but those are the things that, help us, you know, pull the covers back, because in many instances, half of me is like, I got to get up. I still have Marlon. I'm still blessed. And then another half of me is, my baby's not here.
Mhm.
And that's the reality of it. It's not going to change.
Mm.
It's not going to, somehow turn into $1 million and make me feel better. It's like there's no remedy for that. And I think one of the best ways to help me heal from it, aside from meditation and having a counselor and having a life coach and having those spiritual advisors and those wise people to look up to, is also by exercising. and
Okay.
going out on those walks. So those things definitely help because it's easy to stay in bed, but it's harder to get out of bed. And on those days where it's harder, those are the days that, help you push, you know, towards getting out of the bed and being a better you and striving to not, kind of fall into those depressive states. So, exercising definitely helped, and having family members exercising with you definitely helps. So I think that, family, having mental health resources, and exercising are definitely the main cores of how it helped me through those, through what I was going through this year.
Or even what you're still going through.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very much so.
um. For the healthcare system, what about it needs help?
Well, funny you should ask that because the day after my son's funeral, I got a phone call, and it was a family member's distress because um, my cousin had just had a baby, and they weren't releasing her, and they kept changing the reasons as to why they weren't releasing her. And so, me understanding as a I'm black, I'm a mom, I'm family, just scratch that. I know what the healthcare system does to in these situations. And so I knew that in that moment it was up to me to go up there and help. And so the healthcare system biggest flaw is the equality or the quality of healthcare delivery,
Mm.
because at the end of the day, the mainstream media will, like I said, publicize and make many reports about what Black people don't do. But what they're missing in that same narrative is what healthcare systems aren't doing and what healthcare providers won't do. And they're also missing what isn't a part of, the economic part of it, because we don't have universal health care. So
No.
with us not having universal health care, we do not have full access to the healthcare resources that the wealthier counterparts would have. And so I hearing that, I'm like, I can't sit here and just allow this to happen. And so I go and ask them questions, and I ask them how comfortable they are with me coming up there representing them as an advocate. Because, it's, even though I'm family, you can call me, but this means that, they may say some things about you, because in healthcare they'll try and throw you under the bus,
Mm-hmm.
because I've experienced that before, where they've tried to do what they've done to Maisha Taylor, or Maisha, the American Idol contestant. I believe it was last year, where she was having the issues of them taking her kid away, them calling CPS. They threatened to call CPS on me.
Mm.
And when they threatened to call CPS on me, what they thought was that they could throw that threat at me without me actually responding accordingly. And
Mm.
so what I ended up doing is I said, if we are going to sit up here and throw out hollow threats, then what we're going to do is we're going to call the people so we can get everybody involved. Because I did my homework and I found out that they were accusing me, they were going to call Child Protective Services on me and claim neglect for lack of payment, because they claimed that my insurance carrier was no longer issuing payments for my child to be there, which was false. What it was is they had submitted discharge papers to my insurance provider, and they had called multiple meetings because they were trying to persuade me to transfer my child to a long-term care or pediatric long-term care facility,
Mm-hmm.
or turn him over custody wise to them, which I wasn't doing either. And so they thought I wasn't going to get those receipts and just take their word for it. And so what ended up happening is I told my insurance provider, and my insurance provider said, "Oh, you know what? On this discharge paper, it says that your child is healthy. It says that your child is in good condition." And I said, "How is that possible?" When in this instance, my child had, at this moment, he had a went in a cardiac arrest, had a traumatic brain injury, and his brain has swelled so much to the point that it pushed down on his spinal cord.
Mm.
So if we are charting accurate information, how is that accurate? And so what they thought in that moment is that I wasn't going to get that information. And so because in healthcare, you have to keep writing, you have to keep documentation, you have to keep charting, because at some point in time, if you tell enough lies, the truth will come out. And
Mm-hmm.
so in that instance, they thought that they had me, but I already had them because I knew that they counted on me to not do research, but I'm not that type of person. And so that's how the tables turned for me in that situation. And the medical director of my insurance carrier actually implemented an emergency plan and had to have a conversation with them. And so
Nice.
that's how we as a people have to handle it, is by not by it's not, they, I know they want us to do the Hollywood version of what they believe we behave as, but we're educated.
Mm-hmm.
We're here and we're people most of all. Regardless of education, we're still people. And in that instance, I know that using my education, using that journalistic instinct, not trusting, what they're going to tell me because they're already telling lies. I know that I have to do everything to make sure I cover myself and my child without question. And I know that they don't expect us to know the rules and regulations that they have to be upheld to, which is why they provide us with inaccurate health or inadequate health care. So after doing that or experiencing that, I use that information to help me with my family member. And as a result, she was released about 2 hours after I left the hospital.
Nice.
And they actually found out that the reason that she was being held and the measurement was being changed and turned up when she could be discharged was because a physician or the attending physician for her had experienced their own trauma. And as a result of that, they were retaining the patients who were having children as a result of that. And that's where the code of conduct that many people, or the code of ethics, come in, because what had to do with him and his personal life had nothing to do with keeping her there. That's mental and emotional trauma, because you are essentially holding people hostage, keeping them, kidnapping them in a sense, if we want to get really technical about it, because there was no reason for them to stay. And so after I had to went through the uh, I went to talk to the nurse manager, the charge nurse, and then we start asking for code of ethics people, the board of directors. Like, we start going through people until somebody starts holding them accountable, which is the main agenda for what I want to use my platform for, is to hold them accountable, because nobody's holding, people, the healthcare providers who are providing inadequate healthcare, accountable for the mistreatment that they're doing to minorities on a regular basis. Like, they keep coming out with these numbers talking about the morbidities and the mortality rates that we're experiencing maternally, and our infants and newborns are experiencing, but who's holding these people accountable?
True. Very, very true. For the healthcare system again, how much influence does lawsuits have on the healthcare system?
Everything. So I can tell you, from a patient, from a caregiver, from everybody who's not a healthcare provider perspective, that it's everything. Because one of the main things that you find that happens all too often is that they're ready to make, like, they have papers ready for you to sign. And now, because of technology, it's like, okay, we'll send it to you in an email, just sign it, and then you can take a picture and send it. Like, they are that adamant about making sure you release them of certain liabilities that they may or may not, incur during the practice of the procedure or services performed. And so, I mean, in history of it, I would say one of the main things is, like, the cases. Some of the cases that come to mind is, for my region, it's Tomsick versus Ohio Department of Rehab and Corrections. And basically, the case was about a inmate who had experienced some health deform, or I believe she had a lump in her breast, or a benign, and she, experiencing that, was trying to be treated properly, but wasn't properly diagnosed or treated, and or multiple things of that nature. And as a result of that, she ended up, once she got proper treatment, had to get a mastectomy as a
Mm,
result of that. And understand that she sued the corrections department, because even though she may be where she is, it did not, that doesn't negate the duties that healthcare providers have to patients. You're not here for good people. You're not here for bad. You're here for people, period.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And one thing that so many people experience is that it's not good, but what some of these institutions and policies are in places have is, where there's just more sort of mediation, a family relations person sometimes, or mediator. And to me, it's just a polished apology. And then it's kind of like, well, we talked to them about it, and then they said they didn't mean it. And that's not good enough, because people are dying. People are getting, their health is getting compromised. And I mean, even in there's a case, Perkins versus Lavin, and essentially it was about a Jehovah Witness who, she they don't, in that religion, they do not do blood transfusions. They do not accept that. And so she requested that, but after having another medical episode, they then asked her husband, although she had already made it blatantly clear, they asked him because another medical incident had happened. And so in their mind, that absolved the first one, or the initiation of her declining that. And so that's what prompted them to go to the husband for, after the second medical incident happened with her, and he signed off that she should get a blood transfusion instead of dying, but he wasn't a Jehovah's Witness. And so she essentially sued the physician and the hospital for doing that. And she won. Because what they like to do in many cases, not saying who was wrong or right, but in many cases, they like to find these loopholes that they can go around to justify the wrongs that they're doing. It's like, we don't need your personal hate or your personal, bias to dictate what happens in this situation. You, in some instances, they like to play God, and they aren't. And so the law is, essentially, it's the most important thing, because in some instances it can be taken away. Their practices, their licenses, they can have it taken away. But you also have to look at who's in these courtrooms, with the gavel, because these are the same buddies that they're at the on the yacht with. These are the same buddies they're hitting a couple golf strokes with. These are the same people who they are essentially congregating around. And so law has everything to do with it. That's why it's still, even now, make sure you vote. Like, look into these things. Like, look into the laws that are happening in your areas and whatnot. And I try to do, the same thing and keep myself up to date because there's so much going on and happening that it's hard to, to separate and compare, what's fair, what's not fair. And the law is meant to be argued, but at the end of the day, you have a right to humanity. And that's what healthcare providers signed up for to offer a better humanity life for these people by providing these healthcare services, by helping them, by, getting them to a point where they're okay. And that's why law is definitely, essentially the everything of healthcare for the most part.
Hmm, I agree with you. For your advocacy that you do for children and disabilities, tell us about your company and how it intertwines with that. What exactly it is that you do?
Okay, so for me, what I like to do is use my experiences as a melanated medical mom because the whole reason I went back to school was seeing the amount of disparities and the lack of activity or action taken on behalf of those who have special needs who are minorities. And so what we do is not only do we share our experiences, but we collaborate and we talk and use platforms to make sure that we are not just perpetuating awareness, but we're now putting ourselves in positions where there's starting to be boards formed. I've been on multiple panels and discussions, and I know in many people's mind they're tired of talking to their blue because not many people are listening. But what I'm doing for myself is I'm talking to the people who actually have to go back in, make these changes. And so I've been talking with the American Academy of Pediatrics, different representatives from in there, and I've actually written an article in collaboration with some of their pediatricians to help emphasize the lack of quality that minorities are experiencing. And then what we also have been doing is we've been doing different panel discussions so that what we can do is formulate these web series and educate a lot of these healthcare providers who some may not even know that they may be practicing with prejudicial, biases. And so having these panel discussions and then having these seminars and webinars and giving these teachings and showing these people the difference in what health equity really is for Black people as opposed to what's been given to Black people. These are the things and activities that I'm a part of, that I'm doing. And I'm making sure that everybody has a clear understanding that this is a community effort. So we are definitely, behind the scenes, talking with, different institutions and different academies and organizations to make sure that now we are trying to perpetuate accountability in the healthcare industry as opposed to just ask for it, because asking is no longer. We're telling them, you all will be accountable for your actions, period. And so Melanie James Company, we've been, definitely been working in collaborations with their Voice of Greater Cincinnati. We've been working with American Academy of Pediatrics. We've been doing some collaborations with smaller organizations that are connected with Cincinnati Children's. And so there are different companies and organizations that we are working with to definitely perpetuate an accountability culture in healthcare.
Very nice. Yes, you guys are doing such a great job on it because normally people don't want to say anything. Sometimes they don't want to talk anything, especially about the healthcare facility, because sometimes they believe it won't go anywhere.
Right.
But as you said earlier, we need to educate ourselves on it so that nobody will blindside us
Right.
or do things so that we will suffer from the outcome of whatever they do without caring about us and what we deserve the best for ourselves. So we need to educate ourselves And we need to also take a stand for ourselves and talk up. We have to be our own advocates in
Right.
terms of our health for ourselves or family members. We have to do that.
Right. I think the hardest part for caregivers is receiving essential direction, because sometimes being a caregiver is something that kind of snowballs in a way where, in some cases, we see some family members who may experience a medical episode or a health episode that may set them back. But then, because there's no long term, short term, surrounding care, it's kind of like, okay, well, I've been helping you this far, I'm going to keep helping you. And then who knows, how's one to know, what direction to go to. So, one of the things that we are working on definitely doing is trying to develop ways to definitely help have organization and provide tools to help caregivers, because again, caregivers are people who have not gone to school for 12 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Are essentially the unfiltered ones. They're the ones who are working without the policy and procedure regulations, on account of, like, they're not going to a medical board, but in their heart, like their heart, it's on their heart. Like, being a caregiver is something that you're doing out of your heart
Mm-hmm.
and out of love. It's just something that not so many people are aware of, but again, they too have to be the advocates as well. And I think the biggest issues is the dialogue, because one of the worst compliments I've received as a melanated medical mom is, "You are so articulate." What does that
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah,
Because
because
when
it's not something that they expect from us black people though.
that lets me know that you've dealt with many people who look like me, who you believe aren't articulate. So what compliments do you give them?
The
What com-
truth though, the truth though, Melanie, is that sometimes ourselves, black people, are to be blamed for it because as a black person myself, I know black people don't like to read.
Mm,
Not a lot of black persons like to read. Not a lot of black persons like to advocate for themselves. They will make noise, but in terms of advocating, they probably won't. A lot of black persons also don't educate themselves in certain aspects, so they don't know certain things. So that's why people will look on black people that way. So sometimes it's our fault for how we portray ourselves to people.
mhm. Yeah, I agree. In some instances, I would say this. I think that the breakdown really comes from the barrier, because what they like to use a lot of times is what I call medical jargon. And sometimes they'll even get in instances where they'll throw these things out. And I'll give you an example. When the instance of them trying to call CPS on me happened, and I called them back, I said, "So how is it that y'all are trying to kick my child out of the hospital all the while, and y'all, he's brain dead according, to y'all?" And they're like, "No, he's not brain dead." And I'm like, "This is the narrative that has been said since you all had a conference with myself, my husband, my sister, and my other child was there, and y'all said he is not coming back." And the term brain dead became apparent. And so they tried to switcheroo it and try and say, "No, we didn't say that. It's an anoxic brain injury or a traumatic brain injury, TBI, but anoxic brain injury and other medical terms." And so when I called them back, I said, "Well, if that's the case, then we had gotten to a later point where they were trying to force me to put Nazir into in school." And
Mm-mm.
so I'm like, "So you want me to take a child who is in a coma, essentially, or in a comatose state? You want me to take them in a corona or a COVID-19 world now, where schools are one of the highest populations for spikes to happen? You want me to take them into school?" And so they're like, "Yeah."
Mm-mm.
With the And so, in them saying that, I'm like, "Well, the I want to receive the medical clearance for him not to go," and they didn't want to do it. So they tried to use the neural one of the other neurosurgeons tried to say, well, he's like, well, what is it that you need? I said, well, you will write me a letter stating the injury that he has, and you can do an ICD-10, which is basically it's medical a term for medical billing and coding. It's a I believe this is a generalization of it, but or the category, and essentially and him saying that he went from saying ICD 10 to, oh, do you want an ICD 9? And do you want, and he tried to use the medical jargon. And so, in him using that, he wasn't interested in having a conversation or providing me with what I wanted to do. He was
Nope.
interested in throwing those terminologies to try and throw me off. So he thought that he could write a little simple letter that said, I'm the neurosurgeon. And he thought that that's where the buck stops. No, now I have to go around you, but I will. I'll go around you. Make no mistake, you're replaceable neurosurgeon. There are many more to come and are that exist. So I went around him and I had to go to another person in order to get that. But in a day and age where sometimes people are working 12-hour shifts, um, who has the energy to have to keep like that shouldn't be the case for parents. Like it should never be a case for that. And I think that it's harder to get through because instead of him trying to say, okay, so this is what an ICD-10 is, this is what an ICD-9 is this what you want? What is the accomplishment of what you're trying to get to? They're not trying to work with us,
No, no, they're not.
just work against us and flex the stripes of their license. But that's not how this is going to keep working because at the end of the day you can't keep putting out these reports and saying, well, black people aren't doing X, Y, and Z, and then you're not holding the people who are holding back the black people who are trying to get the treatment and the necessities. You're not doing anything to them. No, that this is why the problem is happening. And now if you put accountability happen, what is going to happen is the systemic racism that has been perpetuated since the start of the country is going to be something that is going to change everything that they initially wanted to found healthcare off of, because they don't want to give the credit to the many black pioneers of the healthcare industry who have made it what it is today. And all the while, it's just like y'all are perpetuating it because y'all are worried about credits, and y'all not worried about lives. Y'all worried about the wrong thing. And that's why it's a constant carousel of who did it, oh, this happened, but they're not trying. Like, no, this is a ridiculous circle of cat and mouse, and nobody's getting anywhere because nobody's accountable.
Yeah, that's something that we really need to be changing in this healthcare system. Trust me,
Yes.
it's not good at all. It's not, to be honest. It's not good. And more people just need to advocate for themselves. Ask more questions. Don't just take things that is being said. Ask questions. And if you don't feel like you're getting the best help, find somebody else to do that with. I mean, sometimes it's easier said than done, but we have to do what we have to do for ourselves and our family. So, Melanie, where is it that we can find you?
Okay, so you can find me. I have my own website, so you can find me at www.simplym as in Mary, J as in job, C as in cat.com. You can also catch me on the website of American Academy of Pediatrics because I will be featured on a blog or a article called Health Equity that I myself contributed to. And then
Nice.
there are some behind the scene projects in terms of some webinars. Not enough information to give out, but some webinars also part of the American Academy of Pediatrics, and their website is A as in Apple, A as in Apple, P as in Pediatrics.org. And so you can catch me on that website. And then also, I have been working with, and I must definitely give this CEO a very, very big shout out, love, and definitely all the homage I can. Tammy Floyd Westmoreland. She is the founder of Their Voices of Greater Cincinnati. And I must shout her out on a personal and business level because we've been collaborating, but when Nazir had passed away this past April, I tell you, somebody who came to the hospital with me and cried while I was in front of my child's body
Mm,
and just literally losing my mind and probably feeling crazy is the person who, like, she right there with a tissue and a shoulder and just open arms and hugs, like checking on me, bringing things and just making sure and, letting people know and helping me throughout the entire process. She definitely embodies everything that, I would hope the future, especially for melanated medical moms,
right.
looks like. Definitely embodies everything of a philanthropist. She's an author. We've been collaborating, and she actually is. She too lost her child some time ago, Deontay, and um, may he rest in peace. She founded a nonprofit organization to help other mothers who her child had experienced CP, and so that's cerebral palsy. So in that, she founded a nonprofit organization to help the families who experience the shortcomings in healthcare for CP, and she has definitely helped people around the world. And so I've been helping her. And so I've been doing, some writing collaborations with her. And we're also, having, hosting different gatherings for, the disabilities family. Because, we also want to get out. We know how to have a safe and, COVID safe, environment and whatnot. So you can catch me on her website and also the events that she has. At their voices or their voice.org. And so that's THEIRVOICE.org.
Nice.
So,
Nice. Thank
yes,
yeah.
those are what we're presented with.
Oh my God. Thank you so much, Melanie. I appreciate you coming on to share your story and your experience and how we can better the healthcare system. Not just for us, but for everybody, especially our melanated people. So that's important. And I really do appreciate you. And we're still here praying for you because it's not something easy that you're going through. You and your family. Um, so just continue being strong. You're doing a great job. You're doing a
Thank
great job at it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you. And thank you so much for offering me a little bit of time on your platform because I know we can go and talk for days about this. But thank you so much for this opportunity. I really, really appreciate it.
No problem, my dear. And thank you guys for listening to the Unfiltered by Jade. We'll be back next week, Tuesday. Thank you.